Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Good morning and welcome to First Unitarian Church of Toledo. This is our Sunday service for July 26th, 2020, and we're having a little adventure today with presenting the service. Today we are bringing you a guest speaker remotely. Reverend Jeff Gamble, my good friend who you remember who preached my installation service, is our guest preacher today. So we will be bringing him in soon. We also are having some challenges with our recorded music because Bonnie Rowe is on vacation. She is our usual pianist. And Mickey Miller, our music director, who normally sits in this seat where I am, is celebrating her honeymoon. She and Derek Emch were married on Friday, and we give our warmest congratulations, our best wishes to them, and that certainly is an excused absence from Sunday service. So I welcome you to our congregation today, and I appreciate that you continue to tune in via YouTube. We have coffee hour after the service, and I want to let you know that visitors are welcome for that. And we do hope that you would especially point yourself out as a visitor when you do come to coffee hour, so we can bring you into the conversation and let you be part of our congregation. We kind of miss talking to new people these days, so be a new person for us. I do want to express my appreciation to several people in our congregation who participated in an ongoing Black Lives Matter vigil every Wednesday. That has concluded now, but we will be looking for other ways to connect and to work for social justice. And also, I want you to know that there is going to be some work going on our church grounds pretty soon. I don't have the exact dates yet, but though the building remains closed during the pandemic, we're doing some work at this time, thanks to the Capital campaign, to make improvements both to the sanctuary and to the parking lot. And now I want to introduce my friend, Jeff Gamble, and would bring him onto screen for you to see. Jeff, welcome to First Unitarian Church of Toledo. And we will begin with the opening words and chalice lighting, which will be led by Jeff, and we have a congregational response. And I'm afraid I don't have headphones today, which would help to be able to hear Jeff give his part and me give the response. So if Arun, if you can point to me when it's time for me to speak, that would be greatly helpful. But Jeff begins, and the congregational response, which I'm putting on the screen, is, once I get it there, lovely technology. There it was. All of us need all of us to make it. So when I say that, please, you watching, say that with me. Jeff, please begin.
Good morning, my friends. Our responsive reading, chalice lighting, are the words of the Reverend Teresa Soto. And I will again affirm that as a responsive reading, your response is, all of us need all of us to make it. And we begin in a world where some of us are targeted for struggle and brutality, where others of us benefit and flourish. We affirm, all of us
need all of us to make it.
In a world where powerful people of ill will and indifference make us fearful for our safety and our futures, we affirm,
all of us need all of us to make it.
In the excruciating space that lives between seeing and naming and hearing and challenging, we affirm,
all of us need all of us to make it. And now please join me in our covenant, which I put on screen. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And for our opening song, because we've had some music challenges, I found a video from February 2nd this year, a time when we were meeting in Judy Troutman led all of us in singing a brief piece as part of a challenge for what the Multi-Faith Council was participating in. So Arun will play that, and you please sing along. This is Love One Another.
Love one another.
yet. Now it's time for our story with our religious educator, Kristen Olson.
So this is an adapted story from, which is called We Are All One in Stories in Faith by Gail Forsyth Vale, which was adapted from a Cantonese tale adapted by Lawrence Yep. Once there was a young woman who lived simply but happily with her husband and their 3 children until one day a strange illness of the eyes came into their home. First, her husband and then their eldest son started having trouble with their eyesight. Everything looked blurry and gray to them. They went to the local doctor and they tried medicine after medicine, but nothing worked. Soon they found they could not see at all. Within a week, the illness had spread and now their middle son also could not see, and their youngest. A daughter was beginning to show signs of the illness, rubbing her eyes and complaining that everything looked blurry. Some of their neighbors as well were afflicted with a strange illness. The people of the village began to wonder if they would all soon lose their eyesight. The woman was beside herself with worry. She visited doctor after doctor until finally one doctor told her of a miracle herb that might cure this illness. This healing herb was a plant that grew only in the deepest part of the forest. The woman decided she must leave her family to seek the herb. Early the next morning, she headed into the forest. She looked under bushes, she looked behind trees, she looked everywhere, but the herb was nowhere to be seen. Many hours later, exhausted but still determined, the woman came upon a small stream. She sat down to rest, still looking around for the herb. Then she noticed a big rock had fallen into the stream, making the water run out of the stream to form a little pool. That little pool of water was flooding an anthill. Although she was in a hurry to find the herb, her heart went out to the ants. The woman stopped, looking for the herb long enough to remove the big rock and dig a new channel for the water. With satisfaction, she watched as the water flowed away from the anthill. "We are all one," she stated simply, and continued on her way. The woman slept soundly that night, curled up under a large tree with a blanket to keep her warm. As she slept, a strange dream came to her. In it, she was inside the anthill, surrounded by cheering ants. The queen ant stepped forward majestically. "Do not be afraid," she assured the woman. We have brought you here to thank you for saving our home and our lives. In return, if you ever need our help, all you need to do is call for us, and we will hear you and come to your aid." As the dream faded and the woman began to wake, she heard the queen ant's voice calling after her, distinctly saying, "We are all one." All through that day, the woman searched for the herb. She wondered if she were already too late, if everyone in the village was already blind. She was startled from her thoughts by the sound of a bird, intent upon catching a small centipede. The centipede was scurrying across the ground as quickly as his many legs would carry him. Taking pity upon the defenseless centipede, she quickly scooped him up and frightened the bird from the prey, saying, "We are all one." She carried the centipede to some leaves and placed him gently in their cover. That night, she again had strange dreams. This time, she visited the centipede. "Thank you for saving my life," the tiny voice proclaimed. "And now I will help you as you help me. The herb you seek can be found by an ancient oak tree in the very center of the forest." An image of a gnarled, twisted trunk came to her mind as she heard the centipede state, "We are all one." Then she awoke. The woman spent the next morning making her way into the heart of the woods, searching for the oak tree. As the day progressed, she noticed that the trees around her were getting blurry. Gazing towards the sky, she saw that the sun was still high. With a dawning horror, she realized she too must have contracted the strange illness. Quickening her pace, she continued toward the center of the forest, but with every step, her eyesight worsened. Just as she was giving way to despair, she found the ancient oak tree. Even though she could barely see, she could tell it looked just like the one she had seen in a dream. Stumbling and out of breath, she began searching for the herb frantically. It was no use. Her eyes could no longer tell one plant from another. Crying with frustration, she wept for her husband, her children, herself, and the people of the village. She turned to try to retrace her steps to her home, and then she remembered the ants. Perhaps they could help her now. She called to them, and soon enough, small voices responded. "Bend down," Queen Ant's voice called. "The herb you seek is right here. I am standing on it." Gently, the woman knelt and reached towards the sound. With cautious movements so as not to harm the queen ant, she found the herb and plucked it. Slowly and carefully, she tore a small piece of leaf and chewed it. Almost instantaneously, her sight was restored. Joyfully, she harvested the herbs and prepared to return to her village. But before she left, however, she thanked the ants and proclaimed one last time, "We are all one." The woman walked as swiftly as she could, all day and then all night, by the light of the moon. She hoped she would return in time to save the village from the blindness. Finally, she reached her home. As she called to her children, they followed her voice, for by now they were all completely blind. Anxiously, she gave them bits of the herb and then waited to see what would happen. 1 minute passed, then another. Then her eldest son laughed with joy. "I see you," he shouted. "I truly see you." Soon, everyone in the village had been cured of the strange illness, and the woman who had saved them all returned to her simple but happy life with her husband and their three children. And she never forgot that we are all one.
Thank you, Kristen. Now, I will give a reading by Martin Luther King Jr. This was using language of the time. This is from Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? The white liberal must rid himself of the notion that there can be a tensionless transition from the old order of injustice to the new order of injustice, to the new order of justice. The Negro has not gained a single right in America without persistent pressure and agitation. Nonviolent coercion always brings tension to the surface. This tension, however, must not be seen as destructive. There is a kind of tension that is both healthy and necessary for growth. Society needs nonviolent gadflies to bring its tensions into the open and force its citizens to confront the ugliness of their prejudices and the tragedy of their racism. It is important for the liberal to see that the oppressed person who agitates for his rights is not the creator of tension. He merely brings out the hidden tension that is already alive. Last summer, or 1966, when we had our open housing marches in Chicago, many of our white liberal friends cried out in horror and dismay, "You are creating hostility and hatred in the white communities in which you are marching. You are only developing a white backlash." I could never understand that logic. They failed to realize that the hatred and the hostilities were already latently or subconsciously present. Our marches merely brought them to the surface. The white liberal must escalate his support for racial justice rather than de-escalate it. The need for commitment is greater today than ever. And now I call on Reverend Jeff Gamblé to lead us in meditation, contemplation, and prayer.
Thank you, Reverend Barber. Let us begin our meditation now. Let us hold in our hearts anyone who has power over the lives of others, that they may be just. Particularly those who lead our nation. We ask for them what we ask for ourselves, the wisdom to do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly. May we remember those who defend the helpless, those who advocate for rights we take for granted, those who strive for justice, and those who work to find a way to peace. Let us remember them. Let us affirm the language of racism and exclusion, whether uttered by the uber rich or the guy sitting next to us, is offensive to the beloved community. Let us remember with thanks families, neighbors, teachers, teammates, and all of those in our community who support and protect the health and well-being of our children and young adults. We choose at this moment to lay down the burden of our shortcomings and to grasp the courage to begin anew. Together, we affirm our capacity for goodness and grace, for freedom, purpose, and joy. Let us not be trapped in our past, but freed by creation to live and to grow today. Let us remember with compassion the wounded and the lost. Where there is injury, let us work for health. Where there is confusion and loss, let us bring peace and the gift of knowing that we are equally children of and in the universe, that we are equally loved, equally cherished, just exactly the way we are. And may we remember this day our loved ones who have left our presence through death or decision. May we continue to keep them in our hearts, living in the comfort of their love for us and our love for them. And let us begin a minute of silence.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me. Come to me. In the Broadway play Ragtime, Coalhouse Walker didn't set out to be a terrorist. He was a musician. His girlfriend was killed by Secret Service agents. Coalhouse torched the town's firehouse in revenge, and the white folk came after him. Just before he walked out of the surrounded building he was in to his extrajudicial execution, he sang, "Make them hear you." He believed the power of their words was going to make a difference. This is what he sang. Go out and tell our story, let it echo far and wide. Make them hear you, make them hear you. How justice was our battle and how justice was denied. Make them hear you, make them hear you. And say to those who blame us for the way we chose to fight that sometimes there are battles that are more than black or white. And I could not put down my sword when justice was my right. Make them hear you. Go out and tell our story to your daughters and your sons. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. And tell them, in our struggle, we were not the only ones. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. Your sword could be a sermon or the power of the pen. Teach every child to raise his voice, and then, my brothers, then will justice be demanded by 10 million righteous men. Make them hear you. When they hear you, I'll be near you again.
Thank you, Reverend Barger. I'll get it right. I've only known you how many years? Thank you. That was well done. I am so happy to be with you again. I'm not crazy about the enforced distancing. It's a challenge for we who believe ministry includes proximity. Reverend Barger and I have spoken to each other many times about our frustration with the isolation. And we look forward to that day when we once again can be together in the same room, sharing fellowship. You know, Black people have been doing their darndest to make themselves heard for way longer than any of us have been alive. Their stories of experienced discrimination, racism, dismissive comments, body violations, economic injustice have been there. They did what they could to make us hear them. We liberals, we heard them. We said, oh, that's terrible. We attended a lecture or two and maybe gave a little money, maybe showed up at a rally. But mostly we took the approach it was their job to make us hear them and make change. Let's face it, white supremacy works that way. Most of us are inheritors of it, even if we do not engage in overtly white biased behavior. We white folk are inheritors of the soul crushing mindset that people of color are lesser. I own the white bias that I grew up with. I grew up in a genteelly racist town. The KKK office of the 1920s had long been closed by the time we moved to Troy, Ohio in 1954, thereabouts. The Black folk lived in a specific part of town, actually not far from where I lived. The rest of the town was lily white. The Black men coming back from World War II, who were lucky enough to get a mortgage loan, couldn't get loans at the same rates that the white guys did. Our bank, the First Troy National Bank and Trust Company, would only loan Black people money on houses in areas that the board of the bank wanted Black people to live. Our municipal pool was off limits to Black people. The same with the country club, of which my folks were members. The 3 Jewish families in Troy were also not welcome at the country club. Now, the Black folk in Troy had a community center in which white people were welcome. It included an indoor pool, meeting rooms, gym. And that center had existed in Troy from the early 1900s in one form or another. The community center was in the area of town where the Black folk lived. Again, not far from where I lived. I had no clue that it existed until some white friends in high school talked about shooting hoops at the Lincoln Center. I didn't know what they were talking about. Now, granted, I wasn't much of an athlete, so scouting places to shoot hoops, it wasn't high on my list. Now, in the show Ragtime, Coalhouse Walker sang "Make Them Hear You," and I think, Tim, you did a good job with that. Thank you. And I bought into the concept of "make them hear you." It was their job. I also bought into the paradox that speaking about the plight of people whose lives were made lesser due to bigotry somehow made me racist. Now, my brother and I could not utter a racist statement at home or at school or at church because that would be wrong. But we could not speak to any depth of the systemic reasons people were being beaten in the South by police. Citizens were being hosed by fire departments. Police dogs were biting children. And we saw it on TV. Huntley and Brinkley showed us filmed footage during the early years of nightly network news. They showed us the protests. So that's the stuff that I dragged into what, well, might be called my grown-up years. The echoes of my racist childhood live with me all the time. Long ago, I accepted that while those echoes weren't going away, I have the power. I have the power to mindfully identify them, reflect on them, and set a course that is not infected with racist echoes. It is a practice. It is ongoing. During our chalice lighting today, we used Reverend Teresa Soto's words. We said, all of us need all of us to make it. I think the USS Make Them Hear You has sailed. It's our turn, big time. Actually, it's been our turn for quite a while. And as a country, we're just getting around to really stepping up to the plate to make us hear us. The default was, it's the black folks' job to point out how badly racism had affected their lives. White privilege allowed us to go, isn't that awful? And keep on with our lives that weren't impacted. Well, the COVID-19 quarantines, cameras in every phone, social media presenting racist acts by civil servants, and the documented murder of an astounding number of unarmed Black men and women has brought the ugly reality of white privilege to a place where we can no longer claim immunity. Our streets have been filled over the last few weeks with people bearing witness that it's time. The Portland protest has gone on more than 50 days. It's time. It's time more of us took the big step up in the witness of the deleterious effects of white supremacy. It's time we took the big step in the witness that white supremacy is against our UU principles, even as we acknowledge that we as an institution have mindlessly engaged in white supremacy in our congregations, our bylaws, even our hospitality. Just as I had to challenge myself to become present to the white supremacy cooked into me, I believe we, UUs, have to do the same reflective work, to look in and see in what ways are we mindlessly preserving white supremacy, and then it is our job to make us hear us. In the reading, Dr. King wrote, "The white liberal must escalate his support for social justice rather than de-escalate it. The need for commitment is greater today than ever," unquote. On the front page of the order of our service today, we remember the words of W.E.B. Du Bois, "Now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season." Statements older than 50 years. Writer Monique Judge posted in a video called "How to Be an Ally" in the online newsletter, The Root, on June 26. Now, what she posted was, I think, appropriate for today's sermon. She outlined a guide for being aware of ourselves in the Black ally discussion. Her first admonition is listen, and then listen some more. When Black stories are being told, we are best served by listening. It is inappropriate for us to inject ourselves, our feelings into the narrative. We white folk have a tendency to center ourselves in the discussion, and that is counterproductive. When the stories are told, listen, ponder. We don't have to offer a commentary. We don't have to wait for the person speaking to take a breath and go, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Let me tell you my story." Yeah, no, just listen, just listen. Next, show, don't tell. Do the work. If we are in the movement to rack up feel-good stories about all that we do, perhaps a reevaluation of our commitment is in order. Black people are not interested in our stories of how woke we are. Do the work because it needs to be done, rather than because we need a badge to flash to white and Black folk that says, "I am a good white person." Now, here's a tough one. When Black folk talk about white folk, the person speaking, the Black person speaking, is not referring to all white people. That is the understood message when Black people are talking to other Black people about white folk. It's not every white person that we're talking about. However, when we white folk hear a Black person talking about white people, we have this tendency to want to believe that all white people are being referred to. And we get defensive because, hey, I don't do that. I'm not that person. And when we get defensive, we stop listening and the conversation is over. Author of this piece, Miss Judge, invites us to get over it. Cole House sang "Make Them Hear You." and we've done a lousy job of hearing. The work really is ours to do. Make us hear us. Miss Judge concludes her video with an admonition to us to do the work because it's time that we witness that we are sick and tired of the racist stuff we see every day. Our Black friends have lived in a white supremacist society for over 400 years. If we think we are sick and tired of the racist stuff, how do you think they feel? Clyde Gray is a newscaster in Cincinnati, and during the time that I worked in Cincinnati at the same television station that he did, I remember him saying one day, you know, there isn't a day that goes by that someone doesn't remind me that I'm Black. I never forgot that. And I pledged, please God, mindfully or mindlessly, please do not allow me to be that person that reminds Clyde or any Black person that they are Black. It's time that Clyde and the Black folk of America are freed from the intended and unintended white supremacy that we are all soaked in. We UUs, with our commitment to justice, continue to have a long way to go to make us hear us. And I want to believe that the tide has turned, that white people in America are more ready now than ever to push back against the white supremacy status quo. And it is our job to speak up, to educate, to protest, and to witness. Motivational speaker Paul Scanlon posted on Facebook recently a talk about white solidarity as a barrier to calling out racist comments or racist acts. Now he says the white compact is we won't embarrass another white person by calling out the racism that they're speaking. It's a social code which protects the solidarity of our white privilege, whether we understand that's what's going on or not. So when we stand up and call out a racist joke or racist act, it's going to make us, it's going to make the perpetrator uncomfortable. And God knows we don't like to be uncomfortable. But this is our challenge. This is our opportunity. Socially awkward as it is, knowing it will challenge our white social solidarity to call out the racist joke or act or statement is what we UUs are called to do. We must be champions of change. Marching may not be for us. Maybe you can't go to the halls of government, but we can call out racism in communication. We can say, I don't want to hear it. And if you continue to tell that story, which uses people of color as the butt of the joke, I object. I will remove myself from this discussion or meeting or coffee hour. That moment will be uncomfortable. How long have our citizens of color been uncomfortable? We began with the service speaking, all of us need all of us to make it. It's time. I believe we who are white are called to speak the truth about our white supremacist system, to decry the injustices it has fomented, and to advocate for a just system for all people. It's not going to be easy. This is heavy lifting, and it's time. It's our job. It was never theirs. May it be. and amen.
Thank you, Reverend Gamble. We're honored to have you speak to us today and to bring such strong and immediate advice. Black lives do matter. And I'm glad that you speak to us about that. And now it's offering time for us. We do ask that you give as you can. We know that times have changed and personal needs have affected pocketbooks in great ways, but we also have needs at the congregation, and we do appreciate your continuing to keep us in the cycle as you can. So you can send checks to us here at 3205 Glendale Avenue in Toledo, zip 43614. Or you can pay online. The simplest way to tell you is if you go to our website, uutoledo.org. On the homepage, you can click on Give. And then on that next page, you can click on Online Giving and fill out that form for a contribution. So I thank you for keeping us in your thoughts and giving an offering that helps us bring the work of Unitarian Universalism into the world. And coming soon, next week, we will have our Spiritual Adventures Forum at 10 a.m. as always. I'm not sure what the topic is next week, so you might tune in at 10 o'clock and find out. Then at 11 o'clock, I will begin, there we go. I will begin a series for all 5 Sundays in August. I'm going to preach on catching up. And the concept is I have collected a lot of news clippings and social media posts, etc. over the year. I have a habit of just hitting the save button and I'll get to it later. And I realized I haven't gotten to too much of it. So I'm kind of going to be reviewing some of the material that I have saved and try to turn them into sermons, catching up both with my reading and possibly catching us up with what's going on in the world. So join me and we'll see how August might be a bit different for us this year. And immediately after today's service, you're invited to our social hour, our coffee time. We have a special invitation to visitors. And you see on the screen the Zoom numbers to connect and the password. So make note of that. And please do join after. And our congregants can have some conversation and some social time, but you have to make your own coffee. And now we go back to Reverend Jeff Gamble for closing words. And normally this is sending the flame, but I think we might have some other words from Jeff.
Thank you, Tim. This morning, instead of putting the chalice out, I'd like to leave it lit. The chalice we ignite at the beginning of our service. It reminds us of the renewal of coming together. And so rather than putting it out at the end of the service today, I'd like to leave it lit. Symbolically, as it remains lit, it provides a beacon. It provides light for the path as we move out of our homes into the world as much as we can, bringing the good news of Unitarian Universalism, the good news of social justice, and that we'll leave it at that. And so my closing words, as the voyage of life bears us on separate courses. Forget not that the same stars shine over us, that we are warmed by the same sun, and that the same ideals stir in our hearts while we are apart, one from another. Our meeting is now over. Our service continues. Amen. Have a good week.